2025. Welcome, commissioners. And I welcome anyone who's on Zoom. First order of business, Ms. Devereaux, would you please take roll?
Sharon Wallace.
Present.
Ellen Talbot.
Present.
Philip Lindholm.
Present.
Mark Hare.
Present.
Lynn Larson is absent at this time. Philip Combs
Present.
and Robert Estrada.
Present.
You have quorum.
Thank you. Our first order of business, or I should say our second order of business, is the selection of 2025 chair and vice chair. So let's begin. Do we have any nominations for the position of chair? Ms. Wallace, Dr. Wallace,
Yes, I'd like to nominate, please, Ellen Talbot
for chair.
for chair.
Ms. Talbot, excuse me. Dr. Wallace has nominated Ms. Talbot. Ms. Talbot, would you accept the nomination?
Yeah, I was not, I'm surprised to, and I will accept. I was not, I wasn't planning to, I think I was just, more, wanting to, I'm just happy to be part of the commission but yeah, I will accept.
Okay. Do we have a nomination for the position of chair?
Mr. Chair, I'll also nominate Mark Hare for chair.
Ms. Lindholm has nominated Mr. excuse me, Mr. for chair. Mr. Herb, will you accept the nomination?
I would.
Do we have a nomination for the position of chair? I will nominate Mr. Combs. Mr. Strada, excuse me, nominates Mr. Combs for the position of chair. Will you accept that nomination?
I would.
Sure, I just wanted to also note that at our previous meeting, when we did kind of informally throw out nominations or in preparation for this meeting, I also nominated Mr. Hare as well.
For the position of chair,
At that time, yes.
okay. So do we have a nomination for the position of chair? So at this time, we have 3 individuals nominated for the position of chair. And we'll start on to my left here. All those who would like to see Mr. Combs in the position of chair, please raise your hand. I count 4. Is that correct?
No, I did it briefly to let her know I was still supportive of her, but I wanted to go with the majority.
She thought better.
Okay. Thank you. All those who would like to see Ms. Talbot in the position of chair, please raise your hand. You can raise your own hand if you like to. I count 2.
Can I just say something here? I actually would like her to be vice chair. So do I wait until then? But I just wanted people to start thinking about it.
When
Am I out of order?
we get to the
Okay.
point, when we get to
Thank
that
you.
point.
Okay.
So at this point, I see we have 2 individuals who would like to see Ms. Talbot. All those who would like to see Mr. Herr in the position of chair, please raise your hand.
If I can vote more than once, I'll put mine in there too. Are we allowed
I
to
don't
vote?
think, by Robert's rules, I don't believe we can vote more than once for one position.
I'm just looking here on the screen, you'll see the rules that are there, and I don't see a limitation on the number of times you vote, but just generally speaking, and there's 3 candidates, you would vote for 1.
I would ask that you reconsider your second vote. You vote only once. Okay. So again, Ms. Devereaux, what do we have at this time, please? There were two votes for Mr. Hurd. Is that correct? Okay.
Mr. Chair, since there was some confusion, I wonder if we should start again and ask everyone to vote one time. I'd move toward that.
I see no problem with that. I think it's probably wise to do that. So forget everything you did the first time around and let's try this again, since there's also all on record here, so. All those in favor of having Mr. Combs in the position of chair, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I count this time around. Okay. Those in favor of Ms. Talbot serving as chair, please raise your hand. Okay. All those in favor of Mr. Hurd serving as chair, please raise your hand. 1, 2. Okay. So our new chair will be Mr. Combs. Okay. Now, for vice chair, do I have any nominations for the position of vice chair? Mr. Hurd?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Mr. Philip Lindholm.
Mr. Lindholm has been nominated by Mr. Hurd. Do you accept the nomination?
I would.
Do I have a nomination for the position of vice chair? Dr. Wallace?
I'd like to nominate Ellen Talbot.
Dr. Wallace has nominated Ms. Talbot. Ms. Talbot, will you accept that position?
I would.
Nomination, okay. Do we have a nomination for the position of vice chair? I don't. Okay. At this time, we'll have to take a vote. Okay. Now, who do we have? We have Ms. Talbot and we have. Who else?
Did you need another nomination?
No, how many nominations do we have at this time?
Got
now?
2. I think that's fine.
All those in favor of Ms. Talbot serving as vice chair, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And who's our next one? Nomination?
The other candidate would be Mr. Lindholm.
Are we sure now? Yes. Mr. Lindholm, how many individuals would like to see Mr. Lindholm as a position of vice chair? Please raise your hand. 1, 2, yourself, 2. 2. Okay, Ms. Talbot, you are the vice chair. Congratulations to you all. So I'd like to present this little token of my appreciation to Mr. Combs.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Combs, you've got it.
All right.
Please.
It is hot.
Okay, and let me get you also the public comment sheet. Ms. Spear, we missed anything on that nomination votes?
No, that concludes that process. Thank you very much. And thank you as well for your service this last year as chair.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Mr. Combs, you got it, sir.
Can I steal your agenda?
Oh, gee, you want everything, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's up here, but looks like let's see, as far as new business goes, we're into the new business at this point. Is that correct?
No, Mr. Chair, we're at agenda, or excuse me, approval of meeting minutes.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you. Has everyone had a chance to review the meeting minutes? And any,
Sir, I believe Dr. Wallace was not here at our last meeting in
That's
December.
correct.
That's correct. I think the minutes show that she was present.
oh, okay.
I was here virtually and
Ah,
not in person.
that's
the
right.
Confusion.
Okay, that's the confusion. Okay, so I was wrong. She was here.
All right.
Sorry about that.
No, that's great. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Lynn, yeah, I was just gonna say Lynn, what's your last name again?
Larson.
Commissioner Larson, nominated, and Commissioner her second the motion, so all in favor of approving?
Aye.
Any nay? All right, approved as written. We have any agenda updates, Ms. Spear?
This evening, what we're going to request is that the multifamily tax exemption item be discussed first under new business. So just flipping the order, but nothing else different.
All right. And do we see that we have public comments signed up? Christina Kloss. On the list, there's no one else. Is there anyone else virtually attending?
There are three attendees virtually and 2 wish to speak when you're ready to open public comment.
All right, I think we're ready to open public comment. Let's start with our virtual attendees. We ask you to keep your comments to, or they are limited to 3 minutes. And it would ask you to state your name and the city you're from.
Go ahead, Mr. Dunlop.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my name is James Dunlop. I'm a resident of Lakewood. I can't see the clock, but hopefully I won't go over the 3 minutes. So I just wanted to make some general comments about this tax exemption for multifamily homes that you are discussing or in the process of discussing. And I do think that this is a bad idea because I fail to see how the city necessarily benefits from this. Or, okay, the city bureaucracy may benefit in some way that I don't understand, but I don't think the city residents do. I think that it seems to me that Lakewood, as far as I know, Lakewood doesn't have any requirement that developers have to actually contribute to the infrastructure required to support new development. So this, in a way, is a burden on the city. And the question is, if you give a tax exemption to developers, is there actually any evidence that it actually provides any benefit to the city itself? I tried to do a search for literature on the subject, but past experience of other cities in America, both in terms of newspapers, academic research, and there seems to be actually no evidence that providing these kinds of tax exemptions is actually of any benefit to the city. In fact, there is a view that developers just simply regard this as a tax shelter. It's a way of boosting income without there necessarily being any benefit for Lakewood residents, and does not necessarily help in terms of a provision of affordable housing. And I'm also wondering, to what extent is the city looking ahead? I mean, I know that the United States economy has fared well, despite all the fears about it. But how long is that going to last for? What happens in 4 or 5 years' time when the business cycle finally comes to an end? And I'm just wondering, all of this housing, these built up when at the expense of small businesses are closing down. I suppose larger businesses have the advantage, but I'm just wondering, what is the benefit of it all? And I just think there is no benefit, and I would urge you at the very least to do some kind of academic research or look at the literature on what the impact of these tax exemptions are, because I have a feeling that the evidence is pretty slim in terms of any benefits. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlap. Next up is Mr. Neary.
Thank you. It's the curse of Zoom. We're always asking, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you. Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Walter Neary, and I live on School Street here in Lakewood. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for your volunteering your service to the city. I wanted to share two quick thoughts as you re-engage on the multifamily tax exemption. These are different thoughts than what I'll share as a neighbor of the area during the actual public hearing, because today I wanted to speak to you as someone who was around for the start of cityhood and as a former city council member who really valued my time with advisory board members. And I'm sure you've all heard this from Council Member Boki. I'm just reinforcing the message. First, the thing I wanted to say is that I know most, if not all of you, have expressed opinions on the multifamily tax exemption before, but I really hope the upcoming public hearing as well as written comments are going to have meaning. One of the biggest challenges I found when I served on the city council is that people expect you to have really definite opinions, but they also want you to listen to them during public comment. It's not easy, but it's essential to balance those. Listening does not mean that you are weak in your convictions. It means you're open to learning. Otherwise, why have the public hearing or why read the emails from your neighbors? So I encourage you, and I know you know this, I'm just reinforcing it, to fully engage with the feedback you receive. It's an opportunity to grow and to refine your perspective. Second, I just want to reinforce the unique role you play as members of the commission. You were chosen for a reason. Council members valued your experience, but your job is not to make city staff happy. I know they're nice people. Your job is not to make council members happy. I know they're nice people. Your job isn't necessarily to make me, and I think I'm a nice people, happy. We're professionals, and we know not everyone's going to agree. Your job is to bring your individual informed beliefs, experiences, and perspectives to the table. After considering all the input, I really hope you make the recommendations you believe are best for the community. Whether you think the multifamily tax exemption is the right tool all over the place, or if you don't, please embrace your role as independent thinkers. Staff or council members or people like me not agree with you, but we all want you to do you and do what's right for the community. So thank you again for volunteering your time and all you're doing to help shape the future of our city. I wish you luck in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we'll have Christina Kloss. I think she'll be our last public comment. And yeah, right up to the microphone there. Thank you very much.
I live and work here in the neighborhood, and I'm adjacent to the downtown business district. Thank you for allowing this time for public comment. As a Lakewood resident adjacent to the downtown business district and as a small business owner, Lakewood's plan for multifamily housing tax exemption as it currently stands is a statement to the citizens that Lakewood cares more about big real estate development than they do about building neighborhoods, excuse me, communities and small businesses. Please help us make these answers clear. Are we required to add apartment buildings? Are we required to plan ahead for growth? If we're planning ahead for growth, why are we offering a tax incentive? I just want to reiterate, the city shows its priorities and it doesn't feel like it's the people. You cannot, on one hand, claim to care about Lakewood small businesses in the business sector, and at the same time offer landowners of said small businesses a property tax exemption should they choose to tear down the small business and build an apartment complex. Furthermore, as it currently stands, new apartment structures, should they replace the small businesses or fill the empty corners of the town center, are not being required to have mixed use potential as a part of the permitting process. It has been said by Lakewood officials that improvements like these mixed-use buildings could lead to vibrant business and shopping communities, much like those created in Proctor, Ruston, Kent Station. However, without requiring apartment complexes to be mixed use upon the permitting process, businesses on the bottom, apartments on the top, then all we will end up with is apartment complexes and no room for the business. It is the Planning Commission's job to help the city properly plan ahead. If we want both businesses and apartments to operate together, we need to plan for them together. It is a conversation that has to happen simultaneously. The current multifamily housing tax exemption will increase the population in a way that cannot be reversed. You cannot reverse engineer an apartment complex to create the businesses inside of it. You must advocate, if you must advocate for apartments, which I don't believe you're required to do, then require any future apartments in the business district to be mixed use. Force the building to build storefronts in all apartments downtown and offer the tax incentive to the business, not to the real estate development. Build a vibrant, walkable shopping community, not a sea of apartment complexes that you can no longer change. Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and close the, unless there's any others present who are hoping to get on the sign in. We'll go ahead and close at this time, public comment. There's no public hearings at this time, no unfinished business. And so let's go ahead and proceed to our new business agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this evening, we have our Economic Development Manager, Becky Newton, here to walk you through what's going on with proposed changes to the map of where the multifamily tax exemption might be implemented based on approval by the City Council.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Spear. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Good to be with you this evening. As Ms. Spear alluded to, we are going to talk about the multifamily tax exemption program again this evening. And you can go to the next slide. So basically, the council had reviewed the multifamily tax exemption program again, in particular the residential target areas for potential expansion, which has been before you a couple of times before, and it's coming back around for further consideration. And they reviewed 7 areas within Lakewood, which were all of the potential areas for expansion, and chose to move forward for Planning Commission consideration, the Central Business District, Oak Brook area, Springbrook, and Tillicum areas. Also, they had put forward for you to look at an amendment for the Lakewood Municipal Code 3.64 to allow for the 12-year extension within the Central Business District outside of the tax increment finance area. And so review of the multifamily RTAs is to include a public hearing, which will be held on February 5th. And currently, February 19th is set for you to come back with some recommendations to City Council. Next. And we're going to just go over, kind of review the purpose and intent with you and incentives for the MFTE. So as you know, the MFTE is a very significant economic development tool that promotes investment recovery, and it creates family wage jobs for Lakewood. The areas that it currently is in is the Central Business District, Springbrook, and also most of the Lakewood Station District. The intent of the program is to achieve the development densities that are more conducive to transit use. And so we want to direct that development to the areas where we think is appropriate for residential development, all types of residential development, multifamily, townhomes, and so forth. And encourage all types, and including permanent affordable housing and market rate housing. It also stimulates new construction or rehabilitation of vacant and underutilized buildings for family housing, meets the market demands in what is needed in terms of residential development and housing for all levels of folks, depending on, not dependent on their income, but from affordability to luxury living, if you will, because we do have a very diverse community. And so we want to be able to provide the type of housing that is needed. So incentives, while MFTE provides an exemption for market rate new or rehabilitated housing, it provides additional incentives also for affordability. And the incentive is really a tax deferral of property taxes that would not have been collected anyway, if not for the project. The exemption that we offer currently is an 8-year market rate, which is an economic development tool that is most used. And we also offer a 12-year if 20% is affordable. So those are the very basic incentives and the purpose and intent around it. Next slide. So what are the minimum requirements? It must be located within a residential target area. It must be a minimum of 15 units of multifamily housing, a permanent residential occupancy of at least 50% of the space designated as multifamily housing must be provided for permanent residential occupancy. A proposed completion date must be within 3 years of adoption or acceptance of a multifamily tax exemption. And of course, they must comply with all city comprehensive plan, building, housing, and zoning codes. Next. So following a public hearing, City Council may, in its sole discretion, designate residential target areas within the urban growth area. The target area must lack sufficient available, desirable, and convenient residential housing and attractive and livable places for our residents, community. The providing of additional housing opportunity in the target area will assist in achieving the following purposes: encourage increased residential opportunities within the target areas, or stimulate the construction of new multifamily housing and the rehabilitation of existing vacant and underutilized buildings for multifamily housing. Next. I will mention that as you recall, I'm sure that the incentive does not change the zoning. It simply incentivizes that type of development to meet the community needs. These are the current property areas that we have residential target area, as I mentioned, in the Central Business District, Springbrook, as well as Lakewood Station. Next. And this represents an updated chart of what affordability means in Lakewood for meeting that 20% affordability. And from Lakewood uses the 80% income limit to allow for the affordable housing. Next. Yes.
Just clarifying. So when you say 20% must be affordable, you mean 20% of all of the units have to be at 80% or below affordable? Is that what you mean?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. This is just a listing of all the Lakewood projects that have been approved. We had 614, and then pending, we do anticipate the Alliance project to apply for the multifamily tax exemption. I think the unit count may be a little higher than 390. And then Springbrook 2, which is adjacent to the Wellstone Apartments in Springbrook. That's actually 76 units. So those are the pending units. Next. The application process for the MFTE is you file with the Planning and Public Works Department. They must submit a preliminary floor and site plans, a statement acknowledging the potential tax liability if they don't comply with what is being required and they cease to be eligible for the incentive. The rehabilitation projects, an affidavit stating was sent to within 100 calendar day notice, and that each household was provided housing of comparable size. That's if there is, if folks need to move, then the developer must provide notice and assist with relocation. Housing of comparable size, quality, and price must be provided to those residents. They also must secure from the city verification of the property's non-compliance with our code. And then verification by oath or affirmation of the information that was provided is accurate. Next. The application for the MFTE must be approved or denied by the Planning and Public Works Director within 90 days of being accepted by the city. If approved, a conditional certificate will be issued to the property owner. The city then provides required documentation along with a check to Pierce County once they get their final certification. Next. This is a code amendment that is being put forward, as I mentioned earlier, by City Council. The reason why we didn't recommend moving forward with extension of the 12-year if a project includes a minimum of 20% affordable was that we were going through the tax increment finance process. And so now that that has been finalized and we know where the tax increment finance area is, we are recommending, and City Council is recommending for your review and acceptance of a 12-year extension, which is allowed by state code outside of the tax increment finance area within the central business district. Hopefully that, do you have any questions about that before I move on? Yes, sir.
Your TIF area is defined. What's the project that's the funds are earmarked for or expected?
So our tax increment finance program is based on building public space, open space, so for parks, which we've identified as a key catalyst for redevelopment in the downtown. And so that is the main basis for the TIF. So if the tax increment finance program allows for the city to bond against future tax increases due to private sector development.
So,
Yes.
sorry, just to clarify,
Commissioner.
are there new parks then to
Yes.
be put in here?
That's correct.
Okay, within this area?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are two areas where the city council has put a high priority in 25 and 26 for potential parks in the downtown.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and then
Mr. Combs, Mr. Larson has a question.
Mr. Larson, do you have a question?
I have several questions. I don't know if this is the right place for them. Is your presentation complete?
no, not yet, but if you have a question, I'm happy to entertain
Okay,
that.
going back to page 1, a question as to what constitutes recovery? In the first line, in the first
Sure.
purpose and intent.
So,
What constitutes recovery?
So that would be recovery of properties that have been underutilized or, you know, I would say that those projects, for example, like let's say you have a multifamily complex that needs redevelopment or is in need of repair. There could be a portion of that that could be redeveloped. And so you can recover those residential units and therefore qualify for the incentive in doing so.
Okay, and what is the manner of creating family wage jobs?
Sure.
What does that mean? What's an example of how this tax exemption creates family wage jobs?
The jobs are really related to the construction. So the family wage jobs that are created would be during construction primarily.
So for the construction workers that build the project and so these new
Correct.
jobs.
Yes, sir.
Then my next question is, I have a bit of difficulty understanding that this tax exemption, while it's popular, is actually effective, and that projects would not get built without the tax exemption, or whether it's a tool for us to, as a city, to accomplish assuring that affordable housing gets built. And if that's the case, I wholeheartedly would support that. But I would think that the 12-year exemption at a 20% affordable rate ought to be 30%. And to really drive home the value and the benefit of the tax exemption. And the 8-year market rate, I don't have a comment about that, but it just seems that that it really needs to make sure that it's accomplishing its goal. So my last question is, what checks and balances are in place to assure on a year-to-year basis that the tax exemption function is really accomplishing the goals that the city wants out of it?
So you're asking, say that again, I'm sorry. Sorry. Could you repeat that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
No, I'm sorry. Could you repeat
My
the question?
is
Yes.
what are the checks and balances that the city has in place to monitor the tax exemption function in the projects as they're built, to know that it's really doing its job? Because we're giving up tax dollars here that the city could use to operate. And that's an investment of some kind back into the thought of creating more housing and more affordable housing. We know we need to do that. But I was interested to know how the dollars are really going to work and whether they truly do have the effect that is desired by the legislation.
Well, first of all, the property taxes would not exist if not for the project. And then the city does monitor we're required to monitor all the multifamily tax exemption projects, both for affordable, particularly affordable. There are several requirements that the developer has to abide by in order to keep the affordability tax exemption. And then it requires certification with those that are living in the units, that they qualify as affordable units. And then for the market rate units, we require every year that they also certify that the units are still viable and being rented as for residential use.
Have we had one so far not meet the requirements and have their exemption pulled?
We haven't had any that, to my knowledge.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I had a couple of questions too. What are we doing to address two concerns? One is that there is adequate parking for all of these people, since I have not seen on some of the projects that have been suggested any arrangements made for parking, garage for the inhabitants, and also for the small businesses that may be affected, as one of the constituents brought up. What are we doing to address that location and increase in small businesses to provide space for them as well? They need parking for their clients to come to, as well as the people who are going to live there. So we really do need to have make sure we address all of those issues. What are those plans?
Thank you, Commissioner. So the incentive calls out the requirement that all projects have parking standards that meet code. So it's really about the code that they have to abide by. And so that was really separate from the incentive, first of all. And then the second part of your question? Oh, and businesses.
Correct.
So the way we view it, and if you look at development now, it's being driven by residential development. And so if you increase the housing, which we need to increase the housing, particularly in the downtown, to meet the requirements for our regional center and the growth in the urban area, then that brings in more people to shop, to use services, to visit restaurants. So the idea is not only to develop residential but also to increase the jobs. So there are significant, both residential and commercial requirements to support job increases. And we do support small businesses. The MFTE is an incentive. There's no other incentive really like this for businesses, if you will. The city of Lakewood has to think about whether or not they are gifting funds, if you will. So we can't really incentivize. There's really not a good tool to incentivize businesses. There is a great tool, the MFTE, to incentivize residential development, and that is a key need in the area, and which also, as I mentioned, supports businesses because people live and work here. They visit the theaters, entertainment, services, et cetera.
So just one question along with that, please. And that would be, so is there a group that will review the design to try to encourage it, such as putting small businesses on ground floors or ensuring that the parking is convenient or that it is meeting the goals that were set by this tax exempt status? Is there a group that looks at that to see if we're achieving the goals that we wanted?
Yes, and actually, again, it is all driven by code.
Okay.
So it's not driven by the MFTE incentive. So yeah, the group would be our planning team, our planning and public works team that reviews plans, planning, building, site development, all of that to ensure that it is in line with the codes that we have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I piggyback on what Mr. Larson's comment regarding 20 versus 30. Where did the 20% affordable come from? Is that state?
It's
or is
state.
That's state.
Yes.
So we are in no position to make it 30, or can we?
Well, no, the city can make it more restrictive. We do have that option. I will tell you that there's not very many developers that can do that. That's why we have one project. So it's really, we see it as more of an economic development tool. However, there are developers that, some larger developers that are subsidized that are in better position to afford or to provide affordable housing. So we have some significant affordable housing projects in process right now.
One more question regarding the 12-year. If I read this correctly, we're saying that it's recommended that we recommend that those that are completing their 8-year can go to a 12-year multifamily tax exemption. Is that correct? Only for the 8-year or the
They
10-year?
could, so the first thing would be it could be either an 8 or a 12-year project. And then they could apply for an 12-year extension within 18 to 24 months of the end of their exemption. And if their project includes 20%, so if an 8-year project property owner decides they want to add 20% affordability within their footprint, then they can apply for the extension to 12 years. So 8 plus 12 or 12 plus 12.
So basically, if I'm full in my development and I want to go to the 12, I have to get rid of some people so I can go back to a 20.
You'd have to include 20% affordable, and those people would need to qualify for that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Talbot?
I just want, so on the previous screen that you showed, I wanted to.
Beg your
I'm
pardon?
sorry, Mr. Chair, we do have there's a lot more of this presentation. Would you like to have the rest of it presented to you before
Yeah,
questions?
why don't we go through the rest of the presentation?
Okay.
And then any other questions, comments at the end we can tackle.
Great, thank you. Okay, and so we have one other staff recommendation. for a code change that we've discovered through the process, in that it was not well defined on how to apply. So it currently reads, to file with the Department of Planning and Public Works the required application along with the required fees as set in the Lakewood Master Fee Schedule. If the application shall result in a denial by city, the city will retain that portion, et cetera. So we are recommending to add the text that is in red, which states the application shall be filed after land use permitting is complete or prior to building permit issuance if no land use action is required. Conditional agreements shall be fully executed prior to issuance of building final certificate of occupancy. And this just gives the developer more certainty on how the process works. Okay, so getting into the target area development. So as you know, we have some significant targets for development. I've already mentioned 2,257 units within the downtown by 2035 and 7,300 jobs. So Lakewood is recovering well from the pandemic. And so we are up significantly in terms of jobs. However, the market conditions have slowed or paused a bit, and in some cases stopped due to tightening of credit. And so it's been a little bit more challenging to do some of the projects. However, we do have 500 new housing units that are approved, 600 under review, and 650 units planned. And the map there shows basically our target areas for development. Highest priorities are the downtown and the Lakewood Station District. Next. Okay, City Council did review, as I mentioned, all of the areas that are eligible for the residential target area or to be designated as a residential target area. And on the map, the grayed out areas are existing RTAs, whereas the other areas that are in color, various zoning does allow for it. City Council did look at what we call the northeast quadrant, which includes the Custer Road, and determined that they would prefer to wait until after road improvements are completed to revisit that. Other areas that are not included but they reviewed were Woodbrook. That is due to displacement and a high level of poverty in that area and concern over displacement. And then, so on the left-hand side is a chart of all the zoning areas that allow for a residential target area designation of 15 or more dwelling units per acre. And as you'll see, the central business district has the highest probability to have more development with 100 dwelling units per acre at 90 feet in height. Next, please. Next slide. That's okay. And so this is just another way to view it. A yellow is called out as the RTAs that are existing, and all the green are the areas that it could exist in. And then the purplish area that we've identified is what staff had originally recommended for expansion for highest growth within our regional center and urban growth area. Next. Okay, so consideration, we're going to look at 4 different areas for your consideration. Central Business District is the primary density target area. There is a lot of underutilized property along Stillicum. Also the neighborhood commercial 2 along Bridgeport area, as well as some multifamily. And then along Gravelly Lake Drive, as was presented to you previously, extending down Gravelly Lake Drive to where the Park Shops area is. It does lack sufficient housing to meet our growth targets, and it does meet the intent and standard for the MFTE. Next, please. Okay, the next area council would like you to look at is the Oak Brook area. There is an older shopping area in that, that part of the city. There is a significant amount of neighborhood commercial that is underutilized. And it is adjacent to multifamily, as you'll see as well. It also meets the intent and standard. Next. The third area is Springbrook. It is in a flood zone. There is underutilized property in the neighborhood commercial and multifamily. There is consideration for displacement because there is a mobile home park in the area. It does meet the intent and standards for MFTE. There's just a very small area that we're recommending you look at. And so if you see the two areas that are currently the RTA, then the little corner up just a little bit, Tiffany, right there is what we're recommending consideration for expansion. Next. And then Tillicum. Tillicum is a unique mix of residences and services with a high potential for developing and creating a vibrant village. There's opportunities to address other goods and services. There's a significant amount of underutilized property in the neighborhood commercial area and some in the multifamily area. There is low median income in the area, but it does meet the standard for the MFTE. Next. Okay, and so just to wrap up, kind of the areas that we're looking at for your consideration, the Central Business District, positive for that is that it's our primary density area. It's a regional growth center, and it is a comp plan priority. We have heard that there has been folks coming out in opposition to it because of being adjacent to mature single-family residential areas. It is still being recommended by staff to expand along the Gravelly Lake Drive area because of the high potential to attract developers and encourage property owners to redevelop in that area and to meet our requirements for density for the regional center and to help. It's important to keep that regional center to attract and to get transportation dollars and, as I mentioned, meet our goals for development. Consideration of the NC2 area and MF2 for expansion. And then Oak Brook is ripe for redevelopment. There's underutilized property in the neighborhood commercial that is a potential. There is some potential for commercial displacement because there is quite a bit of commercial in that area. And then consideration of the NC2 area. And then Springbrook, there's the small NC2 expansion is possible. We think Walkshed should be considered, and that's planning looks at how walkable the area is because there's a busy street there. Something just to be aware of. Could be some potential displacement, and it is in a floodplain. So consider the NC2 RTA expansion between Bridgeport, San Francisco, and west of True Lane. And then in Tillicum, as we mentioned, high potential for a vibrant village. There would be a sewer extension required, which would be doable. And then caution you, there could be some potential displacement, and there is 40% poverty or low income area in some of those areas. So we have some concern over that. possibly gentrification, so for your consideration. And then the NC2 northwest of Union and multifamily areas would qualify for an RTA designation. So with that, I'll stop and entertain any additional questions you might have.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lindholm.
A couple questions, if I may. Do we know what the cost will be for the sewer extension to Tillicum?
I do not.
I'd be curious about that. Another unaffiliated question is, am I right in thinking that an investor pulled out of the Alliance project, so we may not expect that 390 number?
There was a change to the project. However, it actually was higher than that. It was like 420 or something. And so I think there's a public hearing on it coming up this month.
On Friday, right?
Pardon me?
On Friday.
Yes.
This Friday, the
That's
hearing
right.
examiner public hearing is being held. There is one developer that did pull out, but the project is moving forward.
Yes.
And we think that 390 number is a.
I think we're still up there at that, around that number.
Okay. And just
Yeah.
one more question, if I may. Now, we can retain the regional growth center status if we allow for things, even if they don't get built, correct?
It is a planning exercise, and the intent under the Puget Sound Regional Council's process is to show that for this particular center here in the city of Lakewood, we have a certain number of jobs and a certain number of housing units planned for. Over time, if those aren't coming to fruition, then we start to get the little questions and dings from PSRC asking why. And we need, as a city, to then consider whether something needs to change, whether there needs to be a change in code requirements and or a shift in incentives to try to continue to achieve the growth that they require to say, okay, you now can qualify for the federal transportation dollars we distribute.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. With regards to the Gravelly Lake extension, can you shed some light on why it wasn't originally included in the RTA or the downtown sub area? Because we're talking about adding it in to that area to allow for the MFTE to come on top of it. Is that correct?
That's correct. The RTA was in the Central Business District was defined in early 2000. And my recollection, it was before my time. However, at that time, the planning team determined that basically what happens is they look at the area and then recommend underutilized areas at that time that they think would move forward for the use. And so the planning team, including the director, determined that that would be the most likely areas to attract. Why they didn't include the Gravelly Lake, I think that it was probably because of the current existing structures and what was, like there was a library, the library was there, and other development along that area. And so I don't know exactly why, but at that, the planning team determined that the area, the bulk area, including the residential that attracted the MFTE, the brownstones up towards Stellicum. And that time, I think that they just determined that there was particular interest in residential development in the areas that were defined.
And I would just add that as she said, the RTA maps and the MFTE program predate the downtown sub-area plan being adopted. The Central Business District being classified as the Regional Urban Growth Center happened in about 2012. So that was probably after the RTA as well. And now we have this sub-area plan that has a different boundary. And this actually is bringing this program to more of the sub-area.
Okay. And one additional question, Mr. Chair. Is there an economic lever that can be pulled on as part of what we're discussing here that can tie, I think before when we discussed specifically the Gravelly Lake extension, I was a proponent of that, but I think as time has gone on, there's been a very clear delineation between multifamily development and mixed use development. And I think in some of those earlier discussions, I think that was being used interchangeably. And now we're finding that there's a dichotomy there. Is there a way for us to encourage mixed use development versus just broadly multifamily development with these programs that we're discussing?
With the multifamily tax exemption, it's just an incentive for residential development. However, the developer would look at that as in any mixed-use project, if the residential portion of it enjoys a tax exemption, then that will help to make the entire project pencil. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand everything has to pencil and it's got to all work out in the numbers. But we want to create policy that encourages the type of development that we want to arrive. And if this broad umbrella is out there of multifamily, yes, we understand that the multifamily umbrella exists, but I would think that we want to further refine that a little bit to encourage that mixed use light to be shed onto the topic. And is there a way for us to do that and still be able to offer the incentive that is in place at the same time? Sure.
So, market conditions really dictate that. So we're finding just on the mixed use piece, it's very challenging for developers to do mixed use. The only, I guess we could, the MFTE, as I mentioned, that's really the incentive is the residential portion. There's no way to incentivize the commercial portion of it.
Ms. Newton, can I just add some color? Because what Commissioner Herr is asking, I think is already satisfied, but it's done through zoning. So if it's designated mixed use, commercial has to be in there. And if it's multifamily only zoning, it doesn't. So that's the linchpin. Yeah. So everything that's here, we're not talking about zoning. This is already zoned for everything that we have. Now, I'm trying to make sure we're all synced up.
That's correct.
And with the zoning, this multifamily tax exemption is a policy the cities have for a long time. It's not up. I mean, we could decide to go back and toss it all out, but that's not what's being proposed. Today is being proposed RTA or an expansion of it. And so I have a couple questions, but I was just trying to clarify because I think that we are getting what we want in the areas we want it. If we want to have more commercial in those projects, we have to look at the zoning, and that's not.
I want to ask the question that I know is being asked outside of this room that we're not answering directly. It's there.
Yeah.
I think all the pieces are there, but the communication to the public, I don't think that's been very clear up to this point.
And one other way to try to answer that, sir, is to say the multifamily tax exemption in its name itself is defined to be a residential incentive. If you want to incentivize mixed use, you could do MFTE and something else. That is a separate decision by the council to ultimately adopt should they wish to do so. But the MFTE is intended to be an incentive for multifamily development. So getting through this process of saying, are we going to change to allow for this 12-year extension opportunity? Are we going to change where RTAs are located in the city in order to allow more areas to use this? That's all still very much related to the residential. The commercial conversation and the incentives for that would be something separate, which could be done by council, by your recommendation to them, et cetera.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Larson.
And yet we were just shown comprehensive plan modifications that change the land use designations of a number of different areas.
It's not changing the land use?
Springbrook included, and I don't understand then what.
The maps that you saw were related to where this program would be implementable. Zoning is not being changed. Allowed uses are not being changed. This is only saying right now you can say, I'm a developer wanting to build multifamily in this part of the city and I qualify for MFTE. change the map to expand where that might be. But it's not saying the zoning and allowed uses are changing anywhere in the city.
Great. Thank you very much for that clarification. I would like to make one other point, and that is that the language that was suggested as a code change, I would support. That makes it, the process so much more fluent, and it makes it easier to administrate, among other things, because you know at the point in time and staff where a person can fit that exemption process. And it's, to me, it's a valuable change in the process.
Ms. Talbot?
I wanted to ask about MFTE from a revenue perspective, because we're talking about multifamily tax exemption of the property tax, correct? And so, right, property
Correct.
tax.
That's
collected.
correct.
And so from a revenue perspective, when I am looking at your biennial budget that just passed, as far, Mr. Lynn hit on Mr. Larson, sorry, hit on a point earlier that property taxes, along with other taxes collected, provide the, operating revenues for the city that pay staff salaries, but also keep the parks open, keep the traffic signals running, maintain the pay for maintenance, et cetera. And so when I look at the most recent biennial budget, the sales tax is the highest stack of, or highest slice of the pie, largest slice of the pie, providing that revenue base, followed by property taxes, followed by utility taxes, other taxes, and then so on and so forth. So is it the view of staff that, is it the viewpoint that that extending, that expanding the MFTE doesn't, I guess, doesn't take a hit on property, that property taxes collected over the course of 8 to 12 more years can be considered negligible, because that's just not a slice of the pie in terms of revenues to care about?
So if I'm understanding,
That's-
two things I understand what you're saying. So a budget is not based on development of properties necessarily. And so the property tax, additional property taxes that are generated from development of residential would not be present if not for the development or the developer. So the project itself, there are tax revenues that are generated just by the construction of projects. And so the property tax is basically just a deferral of taxes to a later date. So if you look at the analysis on the properties, yes, you don't get the property taxes during the 8 or 12 years, but after that, it's significantly higher due to the project.
Okay.
Can I
Yeah,
chime in?
Absolutely.
I've got a bunch of questions too. Does anyone else have any before I jump in? Oh, go ahead. I'll let you.
I also wanted to go back to the map in the slideshow. It's showing on page 26 of our packet, but it's the select zoning RTAs, bus stops, vacant and underutilized parcels, and showing the CBD. So when I see this map, relative to what we're being asked to consider, is I'm looking at the underutilized category 1 and 2 hatching that is already within the existing boundaries of the RTA, relative to the hatching that is in the outside of the RTA that you're asking us to incorporate. It seems like there's just simply more hatching in the existing boundaries. If I were to, if I'm making up numbers here, but have you I'm not gonna make up numbers here, but what is the calculation of like how much square footage of hatching exists within the existing RTA versus the square footage of hatching outside of it. Because the underutilized category 1 and 2, I mean, I think those are the properties that are riper for development, right? Whether it's commercial or mixed use or multifamily. So why can't we focus on that area that's already in the existing RTA?
You're asking why can't we focus on it? So well, first of all, you asked how much is underutilized within the existing RTA versus the recommended expansion.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to point out that isn't it by this map, isn't it kind of apparent that there is already more existing underutilized area in the existing RTA? So what benefit is there to incorporate more?
We're adding to that, so it provides more opportunity for redevelopment. So I don't know the amount of underutilized in terms of square footage in the existing RTA, but we did look at the proposed CBD RTA has 9.25 acres of vacant underutilized property. And so there's a large concentration in and around the Clover Park Shops area. And it includes parcels between 111th and School Street. It does not include the library site, which is, as you know, is now vacant. It could become a new library. We don't know yet. And it does not include several of the older office buildings along Gravelly Lake Drive. There is a trend to right now to repurpose some of that office as well as to residential. Lakewood doesn't have an oversupply of office, but there is still that option as well if you add to the RTA to provide more opportunities for property owners to redevelop. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think my ultimate reaction is just that if we're trying to achieve, and if we're trying to achieve incentivizing beyond multifamily and incorporating mixed use, then perhaps you can expand the MFTE outside of the RTA, but I don't think it gets you very much other than you've kind of given away you've kind of given away more, whereas maybe it's changing the strategy of concentrating on the existing RTA and how you encourage the incentive for commercial use so that you can encourage that true mixed use.
So, yep, so we did estimate in the 9.25 acres that there could be an additional 900 units added along Gravelly Lake Drive. And as I had mentioned before, we don't have a way to incentivize necessarily mixed use. And so the residential incentive is really the main tool that we have to do that. With that, it also encourages mixed use. And if mixed use is required in certain overlays, then that developer would benefit from the residential multifamily tax exemption during the period of the 8 years or 12 years.
Any more questions? I do. Estrada.
Under your RTA potential recommendations, I would recommend we add under the CBD as a caution, potential commercial displacement, because we do have those shops down there. And if I recall, well, this is point number 2, was that area was added after we had a request from someone who owns property there to go multifamily tax area. Then staff looked at it and then they brought that particular area. And they included this particular area. But I was pointing out at the time, potential commercial displacement, because we have all the shops there that were going to come down. So I need to add that, please. That was just a clarification. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just one comment, please. I think that we need to think a little bit about the commercial displacement. Jobs are important. And yes, we have state mandates for housing. People need housing, of course. But if they don't have jobs, then what are we doing? And I understand about these are incentives that we have, but it would be nice if we had some creative tool to really look at the impact. Like those shops he's talking about are very real and they're being quite used. And so now we're going to convert that to housing. What happens to those shops? So I think we really do need to address that issue. It's a real issue for the small business owners. And we need to look at what are we doing to our small businesses and how do we incentivize that we can encourage that? I mean, I see big empty spaces in other places and I just think we're missing a piece. So I just want to bring that up. I think that needs to be studied.
Anyone else?
Agreed.
Maybe I should give Ms. Spear a little runway or heads up. I'm going to ask questions and then I'll give you a second to think about it. One, have we met our housing goals within the city? How many of the last 15 years? 2, well, you can think about it. I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's a big question. And 2, how much of the housing do we anticipate will be built without MFTE, growth? So back to Ms. Newton. One of the things I'm kind of picking up from everybody is we're talking a lot about the MFT program and the RTA is a little bit of a side nugget. And so one of the things that would be helpful for me is to see the map of the RTA expansion portions. What are the areas that you are asking to be approved? I saw the map, but to me, I only saw the RTA boundary. I didn't see a clear boundary or highlight or anything for the expanded areas. And I verbally heard you and I saw it, but I didn't see that. Is that something you have?
That's because that's intentional, because what we're presenting to you is the areas that are allowed to be an residential target area. And so from the staff's perspective, we're looking at, what are those underutilized areas within the different zoning that would allow for it. So it's at this point in time, it's for Planning Commission to kind of determine which areas you would like to move forward with. The only staff recommendation that we are putting forward is the Gravelly Lake Drive extension at this time.
Is that one?
As a recommendation.
Is that one mapped out, the area specifically?
It was presented to Planning Commission previously.
Last year, yeah.
And there is a depiction of it in one of the slides. However, as I mentioned, it's kind of intentional because we wanted the Planning Commission, City Council wanted Planning Commission to look at the different areas and present your ideas and recommendations on where you think that that residential target areas would or would not be expanded to.
Yeah, I see them here. And so that's the only one that is defined right now.
Correct.
Is your recommendation.
Yes.
And the rest of the areas were recommendations based off of just verbiage, right?
It's just, they're not necessarily our recommendations, but areas that would allow for it.
Would allow, okay.
Correct.
All right, so I don't know how we tackle that one because we don't have charrettes outside of this meeting. So do you,
The process that's in front of you now as a planning commission is cast your mind back to last fall, where there was actually a process by which this came through you once before. It went up to the city council. There was significant public comment and concern voiced at that point to council that they hadn't seen enough about this. So council then said, okay, take it back to the planning commission, and here we are tonight. It is up to you if you want to take more time than is currently scheduled. So if you would like to add another study session and incorporate additional public outreach opportunity, open house kind of thing, we certainly can do that. But the idea was that the council said, okay, these are the areas we'd like you to consider yes or no on. The staff has now brought to you this is the one that as a positive recommendation. The rest of them are, it's up to you if you want to recommend it. It's a spot where it is eligible to be part of the program, but there's not a recommendation associated. So if you need more time than a public hearing and then action, that is totally within your decision.
I personally would like to be able to look at it a little bit more and be able to look at the area defined. Again, we're talking not about should we do MFTE, it's should we expand this program.
Right.
And I can say anecdotally, I do look at a lot of the other municipalities and what they use this for and how they make it work or don't. And the areas that don't have these programs do not see the degree of development. And we are short on goals as far as I can tell, and maybe you can answer the questions because I think I know the answer, but I didn't want to presume.
As it sits right now and what was adopted last year in the big 10-year update you all lived and suffered through was that in the downtown sub-area specifically, about a quarter of the city's total housing growth or housing unit growth is targeted for there through 2044. And that translates into about 2,300 units. There is also in that same area a current target of about 73% of the jobs to go within downtown. That split between housing and jobs is going to be reviewed this year because PSRC is doing their review of all the regional centers. So that proportion might come to you as a potential change to actually increase the number of housing units and lower the number of jobs within the downtown to spread the jobs further out, for instance, to Station District, where there's also a lot of commercial activity happening. But as it stands, it's about a 24% of the total city's housing unit growth within the downtown area. Right now, the city is growing much slower on an annual basis than it would, quote, need to in order to meet the target by 2044 that it has. And so it's a matter of looking at how to encourage, incentivize, whatever word you want to use, into the downtown and the Station District in particular, additional housing growth. And so the MFTE program is one tool by which to do that. It is limited to multifamily development, as we've been talking about tonight. But that's the idea, is to look at where this program could be put in place, actually citywide, to increase the likelihood of a developer looking in, doing his math and deciding that, yes, this does pencil, makes sense to come into Lakewood and build.
I should just add the State Commerce Department approved this for a reason. The reason that all the cities are allowed to do this program or participate is for economic development and to provide housing. Two things, and it's not just housing and it's not affordable, it's for economic development and housing. And it was kind of in that order. And I highly recommend everybody just go back and just study the program, just let MFTE just a little bit, because it's a novel thing for people who aren't familiar with it. Even on the planning commission, I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but it's something that we all are not super familiar with, and we probably should be. And the reason that we talked about construction jobs, and not to disagree with that, it's huge for construction, and you get as a city construction tax income from that, but you also get all of the property tax after 10 years. So if you take a building who's only generating $10,000 of property tax because it's small and undersized, underutilized as is labeled here, that building built out, even if it's not built to a maximum potential, easily would be 10, 20 times that when you get property valuation. So by year 10, you have already paid for the last 10 years, and now you're paying yourself forward. It's a little bit of we're going to hold off on, buying it now so we can get a bigger return later. And that's typically how this works. The other thing, though, that is worth noting is the economic development is for businesses, people who own businesses nearby. All these residents come in, create commercial activity nearby. And I've been talking to economists and looking at the different reports related to this about effectiveness of this or not. And there's all kinds of debate. There isn't any evidence to support it doesn't work. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff to say that it does. But I would, challenge everyone to kind of go out and look on your own and see what you come up with. But the sales that happen from, you get 200 new units, that's 200 new households spending money, and they usually spend it nearby. And the sales tax that comes from all online sales stays in the city you buy it. So if you're an online buyer, even better for the city. But it really is huge for providing new business to the area. Now, that's the MFT. We're not talking about MFT. It's our RTA expansion. I get it. But I think sometimes it's just good to refresh on what it is and why it's there. The opportunity for the small business owners who have these small shops, maybe they don't want to have that small shop. Maybe they would like to do more with it or be able to expand their business or refresh it. And this is a tool that property owner now has to do it. And I think that we're assuming that all businesses are being run by someone other than the owner. And that's not always the case. In fact, oftentimes they do own it. And so it's something that can be an access for them. I do agree with Mr. Estrada that it would be helpful to see this displacement because we don't want to lose these businesses, and very smart developers will work their darndest to try and keep those businesses there that are successful. So I don't know how we map that out, but maybe in our exercise in Charette, we can talk about that. The city that I saw not do this program over a 12-year period had 0 projects. They opened a window up for 2 years and 3 developments were done. Now that's in an area where they really want development. Here, we already have the program. We just don't have a lot of people coming in. And so one of the challenges we do run across right now is Alliance is an affordable housing developer. And so they're going to lean one way or the other, typically. There's 2 developers looking to go into the city that I was just referencing a second ago. And both of them said, we will come in subject to being approved for an MFTE, because otherwise we can't make this pencil in this environment. So those are anecdotal references. But I think there's so many jobs that get created because when you take this, you have the commercial, the parking, and then all these new households, there's stuff that has to support these households, not to mention the people who have to manage a property. You take a single structure, and I only know because I've operated many of these, and you'll have for a 200 unit, you'll have 5 to 6 staff members. That's new jobs that weren't there before. So those are just some things to consider, not this all multifamily or MFTE related. And I'm really trying to focus on the RTA moving forward, but I think it's helpful to know a little bit of background about why it's there and what it is. And I think that when we look at these expansion areas, we do need to look at where do they line up, where are they next to, and how can we buffer against those areas that maybe don't want it. And I think that, even if it's a good thing for the area, sometimes it may not make sense.
If I could just add one kind of hair-splitting clarification. Multifamily tax exemption in the city of Lakewood can only be applied in residential target areas. So what's being talked about here is not any change to the program other than the code sections that Ms. Newton mentioned. What is being talked about is changing the areas where MFT would be applied.
Right.
The MFTE right now is in those black outlines you saw on the maps. What's being talked about is expanding residential target areas, and those are areas that would then qualify for a developer to say, hey, I'd like to take advantage of MFTE. So it's really, you're not changing the program other than perhaps those amendments. You're just changing where MFTE could be used in the city.
Those are the areas that I'm hoping to get mapped out.
Right, right.
I would like to see us spend more time looking at the RTA expansion process and what additional properties could be included in what areas. And so I would concur with you that another study session, discussion session would be appropriate.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to add, I think what we're experiencing, as we further clarified why the expansion of the RTA is important with regard to the MFTE, the overlay that comes on top of all of this is the community is being very loud and clear right now that just because a tool is out there doesn't mean it needs to be applied everywhere. And we're hearing, as all of us move throughout the community, we've heard here tonight that the community wants more discussion on this and more clarity on how it's going to be executed. I think that ambiguity right now is what is making this such a really hot topic item at the moment. I don't think anybody is arguing that it's not a good tool. I think it's the way it's being implemented at the moment, based on the type of utilization of the tool that we've seen so far, and the feeling from a lot of folks that, we all know what the legislature has set upon us with the comprehensive plan update and what it means to comply with that and how to navigate that. But it actually changes the fabric and feel of the community outside of these doors. And folks are walking outside their front door and they're taking note of what the city looks like today. And they are quite honestly scared about what it might look like tomorrow, because I don't think we're doing a good job of painting that picture for them. And really highlighting the benefit that is there, that is capturable, and what we're going to do with that as we move forward. I think that's probably what we really need to provide to the council in order to move forward in a way where there's not this big clash that we're experiencing right now.
Now, I haven't heard, I personally haven't had or heard of a big clash on this, other than the one comment today. But I do agree. I do agree that, and if the temperament's just one person, I think it merits further consideration and looking into it. I agree. We need to understand it before we approve it or even make recommendations. And I don't think we're really there today. I think we need to gather more information and really kind of look at this. And I would reiterate, I think you're right on. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And so, we have a responsibility to try and make sure we right size it for our community. And sometimes it may be a little bit longer that we wait, you kind of have to pent up demand before you really can go after it. But we'll look into this a little bit more, and then we'll be circling back. We may invite you back in to talk. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else you had to add?
I think that's it.
Could I also tag one thing, if I could ask that we bring into the next discussion is, so I do appreciate all of our different backgrounds and knowledge bases where we come from. Housing for me is not my wheelhouse, so I'm not as comfortable with it and less of an expert as others here. And Mr. Chair, certainly you have expressed you've brought to light for, a lot of different things that I wasn't aware of. I would be interested to see there from any of us on this body, and also staff, some examples of maybe some communities either throughout the state or elsewhere where this has worked, this model works. And I would say maybe even from a pre-COVID point of view, because I think it's really hard to talk about the cost of developing now in this post-COVID times, and then anticipating just the costs, the costs of rising costs of where we at. So if there are examples of communities that you know, that you guys all know about, or staff that you know about, that, you know, pre-COVID that were, you know, that maybe we should do. And I want to be careful that we're not, because I don't want to compare ourselves to different communities, but it would be nice to have some examples, to have some context.
Are you suggesting that, I mean, there are certain communities that have been more successful and attracted more MFTE incentivized development. So is that kind of what you're looking for?
I think I'm interested to see communities that where staff is inspired by, that where you see, you know, hey, maybe these demographics are or aren't similar to Lakewood, or what, or, you know, what were the elements that that made that brought development in under using this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Talbot. If there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and wrap up.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Spear, I know we are digging deep into the time, but you think we can get through a planning commission work plan?
Yes, this won't take very long at all, I don't think. So it's in your packet already, and it's on the beginning of page 7. Just to let you know, the city council liaison, I believe, was appointed Monday night, so this will change once we know that final decision, unless some of you already do, I don't know. But the group meets twice a month, and so what this chart is showing is what is anticipated for each one of the quarters in 2025. Some of them will continue on into future years as well. And based on the conversation that was just had, I would assume that the multifamily tax exemption item here will expand beyond first quarter as well. We'll add some additional time for public discussion and outreach, potentially more than one public hearing. It's up to you, but I would call that a 2-quarter item probably. We've already done the election of the chair and vice chair. We've already, we are doing the work plan. The 25-26 goals of the city council is something that is easily available on the website. So I'm just going to send you a link to that if you wouldn't mind taking a look. What they have done is made it very clear with those goals coupled with the budget that they just adopted, where they want to spend time and really their effort and their money, quite frankly, that the citizens provide. And the top one is the downtown in providing some park and open space areas in the downtown. So that's in some ways related to what was just discussed tonight as well. As always, you'll have your annual discussion of the Housing Action Plan. You had a preview of that at the end of last year when Mr. Gum came and talked about what was being discussed in partnership with City of Tacoma, because it is a 2-jurisdiction housing action plan. This is the one that sets up how federal dollars or state dollars are used to help build truly subsidized housing or help maintain lower income housing units in the city. So that's not the market rate stuff. This is the subsidized, really affordable housing action plan. We also annually have representatives of community groups as well as staff come and present you information regarding what has happened. In this case, it'll be 2024 for shoreline restoration activities. And then there's always the question, given the information put to you, whether you feel the city council should look at updates to the shoreline restoration plan or even the shoreline master program. MFTE, we just have talked about at length. This new name is something that you've actually talked about in various ways before. Natural environment and climate change. You've had the energy and climate change chapter out of our comp plan in front of you. You've had the tree retention and protection ordinance in front of the commission over the last few years. And there's also been the urban forestry program discussed. So what we're trying to do with this new one is bring all of that together, because it's so interrelated, and to quit confusing and trying to put it all in separate silos. Right. So that's going to be a process that you'll have touches on that throughout the year and into next, once it starts to become clear how much is actually incorporated in that. Then we do have also the 2025 comprehensive plan amendment cycle. It's going to be happening earlier this year because I think 4 out of the 9 are actually state law driven, and everything needs to be adopted and in place by June 30th. So we're trying to get it through the planning commission in time for council to do its process and meet those state deadlines. You also always have the annual presentation of the upcoming 6-year transportation improvement program. So those capital projects that have been funded or planned. The climate change annual report actually is a tentative because that may tie right back up into what I was just mentioning with this new implementation plan. And then the other one as well that's on here is the 1181, that lengthy paragraph there. That is also tied to that idea of a consolidated and integrated plan for the city. But state law says between now and 2029, there's a number of new things that the city needs to plan for related to anticipating climate change and also identifying ways to be resilient against things like increased temperatures, flood risk, et cetera, that may be happening here in the city of Lakewood over time. And then the last big one would be the development regulation amendments that might pop up because of experience of people coming and trying to pull a permit. There's a bugaboo in the code we need to change. Maybe it's in reaction to whatever the city, or excuse me, the state legislature will pass this session. There's all those things that we have to just keep track of, and that'll come toward the end of the year. So those are the items as of now for 2025, obviously subject to change. And again, I'll make sure to reflect on this when you get the next version of it, that the MFTE will get some more time in front of you before action is taken. And that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
One
Estrada.
quick question regarding our plans. I guess this year, and maybe it was last year also, one individual briefed the city council on all the committee's plans. It happened this past Monday at the study session. One individual, he talked about all of them, very knowledgeable. He was reading a script. What happened to each commission or each entity going and visiting the city council during one of their meetings and getting to know them and then presenting their plan?
The way it's handled now, that will still happen annually. And so for Planning Commission, I believe it's the second meeting in May where that discussion will happen. I'm not sure why, other than just to say, yes, commissions and boards, go forth, here's your work plan, and that's okay to do it. And in order to do that quickly in the year so you can proceed, maybe that's why they're doing it with the one person on Monday night, this last Monday. But yes, you still will have that annual opportunity to sit down and meet with council.
Good, thank you.
Sorry, I was waiting for you to close the meeting there. Is there anything else that we need to address? Any final business?
The next meeting will be February 5th, and we'll adjust the agenda based on the MFTE conversation this evening. We probably will just move out to a future date, the public hearing.
Yeah.
And have some additional information for you about that.
That sounds great. Well, with no further ado, this meeting is adjourned.
I think it's now time to determine whether you can manage